one and all, as we, this special select committee of the Parliament, reconvene our meeting, and in particular, this public hearing and in keeping with our mandate. Might I advise that this meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's channel 11, Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel ParlView. Might I mention as well that members of the media are also very present with us in the House, in this House. Let me restate the mandate of this committee as so directed by the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the information of all present and listening. This committee is mandated to obtain information, documentation, and/or evidence relevant to and/or touching and concerning the method, process, criterion, and considerations utilized by the Police Service Commission and/or the firm employed by the Police Service Commission in the selection of candidates for the position of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police, to enable the House of Representatives to consider the notifications submitted to it by His Excellency the President pursuant to Section 123 of the Constitution. And secondly, we are mandated to report to the House by the 31st of March 2018. Let me, therefore, invite those of you who has kindly accepted our invitation, particularly in recognition of the fact that you are not officially on duty, but you were at the relevant times. We are really appreciative of your presence. And I would therefore like to invite all of you who have been invited to introduce yourselves to us for the record, and subsequently we will introduce ourselves to you. Might I begin with the chairman, or the former chairman, and then we proceed.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Maria Therese Gomes, and I would also like to give some remarks, some opening remarks. Is that fine?
Not at this juncture.
Okay.
Please,
so
I'm the
former chairman of the Police Service Commission, Dr. Maria Therese Gomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Morning, I'm Commodore Anthony Franklin, member of the Commission.
Morning, I'm Mr. Martin George, member of the Police Service Commission.
Good morning, I am Dinanath Ramkisoon, a member of the Police Service Commission.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am Prabhavati Maraj, Acting Director of Personnel Administration.
Good morning, members. Marcia Pilo-Brady, Acting Deputy Director of Personnel Administration.
Good morning, Natasha Cicheran, Legal Advisor, Service Commissions Department.
Good morning, Vita Duran, Senior State Counsel.
By way of introduction, I am Fitzgerald S. Albert Hines, Chairman of this committee.
Dr. Rudolph Munilal, a member of the committee.
Terence D. Alsing, member.
And welcome, Nicole Olivier, member.
Gang Singh, member.
Good morning, I am Randall Mitchell, a member of this committee.
By way of procedure, all questions and all comments will be directed through the chair. For the benefit of those who are looking and listening, the Police Service Commission is an independent, constitutionally appointed body with powers to appoint persons to hold and act in the office of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police, among many other functions. Mention those because those are what are before us today. The Director of Personnel Administration and the administration of the service commissions actually act as the secretariat to, the support to that institution that is the Police Service Commission. It holds the records, the files, and it really supports the work of the commission from an administrative and legal standpoint. Hence the presence of the director of the personnel administration and members of the service commission here this morning. Madam Dr. Gomes, I would now invite you to make some opening remarks in relation to the mandate and the reasons why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning again to the Honorable Minister. Mr. Hines.
Chairman, you say Chairman, yes,
sorry.
Thank you. Here in that capacity.
And distinguished members of the Special Select Committee. Bear with me a little bit, I have a very bad cold. As the former chairman of the Police Service Commission, I wish to note that at my last appearance before the Joint Select Committee, of which you, Mr. Hines, were also the chairman, the first question that you asked about was the independence of the commission. I note today that I come before you as a citizen who is doing my duty as the former chairman of the Police Service Commission. I headed a commission which conducted the recruitment and selection process with the highest levels of professionalism, integrity, and confidentiality, being fair and free from favor. I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank those involved, the DPA, the Service Commissions Department, the firm KPMG, Commission members and Secretariat for their support and diligence in undertaking this selection and recruitment exercise. We charted new ground with courage, patience, and fortitude. And I am proud as a woman to have been the chair in this recruitment exercise and to have brought it to the point where we have reached the nomination stage and submitted that to the President. Today is also designated as a day of prayer for world peace. And as we know only too well, our world and our sweet TNT needs peace at this time. The violence and the crime levels for the 2 months are so significant. So today, I ask all of us to pray for peace in our beloved land of Trinidad and Tobago. And I wish each of you the peace of God that surpasses all understanding today and always. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Might I, on behalf of the committee, in an attempt to set the tone, I would like to say as well, we thank you and your commission members for your service to Trinidad and Tobago. We recognize your independent constitutional status as a commission. We recognize your work, and we, as a committee based on our mandate, we are to assist the Parliament with whatever we gather from this interaction. We will proceed in the spirit of peace and in the spirit of an understanding of the need for respect. For my own part, very quickly, I would say that many of the institutions and many of the circumstances that we have to deal with in our country today are troublesome and troubling. And we do require some settlement and some peace, and this committee well understands that, and we're proceeding with those firmly in mind. You are and were required to act in accordance with legal notice number 218 of 2015 as amended by Mr. Justice, as he then was, Raj Kumar, in a matter that led to that amendment, and we are all familiar with it, and it is before us. Section 123(3) of the Constitution provides, and under which you were required to submit to the President a list of persons nominated for the appointment to the office of Commissioner and/or Deputy Commissioner of Police. By Section 123, subsection 4 of this said Constitution, the President was then required to issue a notification to the House of Representatives of the persons so nominated by you, and this notification is subject to the affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives. That was indeed done. And those notifications are currently before the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is well aware of its role in this process, and it is for this reason that it is the duty of this committee to understand the procedure and the process followed by the Commission in order to provide information to the House of Representatives, information that such House has deemed relevant to its decision in terms of whether or not it could confirm the nominees in that notification that is now before the House. This committee, very importantly, is very, very little or unconcerned as to who the individuals or the candidates are, and with any arguments for or against any candidate. That is not the role of this committee. We appreciate that that is exclusively the role of the Commission, which you have thus far carried out. It is for this reason that this committee will not identify by name any applicant or engage in any discussion with you on the issue of the merits of any applicant or any matter related to any applicant in particular. We received a letter, a covering letter, to the documents that we requested from you in writing, which you quite properly provided. And that letter, at the hand of the acting DPA, raised your concerns about issues of confidentiality and issues of potential impact on other persons on those lists who are not immediately for the consideration of the House of Representatives. We found that letter useful, we found it persuasive, and we assure you that our remit is limited to the process issues for the benefit of the House of Representatives, to whom it falls to affirm or to negative that which is now before us for our consideration. The fact that matters related to candidates have been reported, factual or not, in the print and electronic media has not escaped the attention of this committee. Members of the media are present here today. These proceedings are going live, and we assure you that this committee is going to be and remain acutely sensitive to the issues as I have just described them, so much so that if and when it becomes necessary to make reference to any particular candidate or any particular score, we have developed among us as a committee, which I trust we have shared with you. Have we? The Secretariat has shared with you a bit of a code, a bit of a coded guide. So to the extent that it becomes practical to make reference to something in documents that you now have, we will use that code so as not to identify a name or so. Madam Dr. Gomes, you with me? And
yes,
members of the commission, and this is the way we intend to proceed. So I will now make the floor available to my colleagues to begin this process of examination of the procedures adopted by you. I start with Mr. Dayal Singh.
Thank you very much, and good morning, all. In keeping with the chairman's advice, we are not here. We are only here to examine process. So, Chairman, I just have about 4 short questions on process. Question number 1. What procurement process was used to find the firm? Was it open tender, selective, and what fee was paid to the firm?
Okay, I thought you were going to ask 4 questions.
No, I'll ask the one.
Yes, we had an open tender, and it costed approximately 3.2 million. It came in for less, actually.
Thank you. Question number 2. In accordance with the Constitution, the firm is to do the recruitment and selection. Am I correct? Because what concerns me was the former chairman's opening statement that the PSC did the actual recruitment and selection. Did the PSC do it, or did the firm do it?
The firm assisted the PSC. The PSC was involved in every aspect of this because the judgment allowed for that.
Okay. With that, how did persons who applied, did people apply separately for the post of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police? Were there separate applications?
Some people applied for deputy, some people applied for Commissioner of Police, some people applied for both posts.
Some people applied for both posts. Okay. How many people applied for the post of Commissioner of Police?
To check that now.
And how many people applied for the post of Deputy Commissioner of Police? And how many people applied for both?
Unfortunately, because I don't have those documents in my possession, they are in the Keeper of Records' possession, Ms. Maraj. I can't say accurately, so we'll have to get back to you on that maybe later.
I think Ms. Maraj can tell us.
Okay, fine.
It's in front of us.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So what I have in front of me, list of applicants for advertised positions. There were 54 applicants. I know the question is how many. The way how this list is developed, I will have to count that in a moment.
Disaggregated, yes.
Yes, but there were 50 that were deemed eligible, that is those meeting all the requirements, and 4 that were ineligible, meaning they did not meet the requirements of the office.
Was there any distinction made in the applicants for Commissioner of Police? Would somebody who applied for Commissioner be considered for Deputy and vice versa?
I think the chairman, former chairman might be best
Sure.
to answer that.
Because when you look at the Constitution for the posts, the 2 posts, not the Constitution, the job summaries for Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police, they are like night and day. One is in charge of strategic direction, and one is in charge of assisting in the implementation of strategic direction.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Dayal Singh. So, according to the legal notice 219 of 2015, beg pardon, it outlines the qualifications for the positions or posts of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police. They are the same qualifications of a degree in law, public service management, criminal justice, or any relevant degrees. The only difference is the years of experience.
Right.
10 or 15 years of experience.
10, let me just for the benefit of those who are listening, 10 in relation to Deputy Commissioner.
Yes.
And 15 in relation to Commissioner.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. So, in terms of the of looking at recruitment practices. All candidates, the way it was done, all candidates had an equal opportunity to be either selected for Commissioner of Police or Deputy Commissioner of Police.
Even though they would have applied for a specific post, when was this merging done, and on what authority was this merging done, so that people could have, who applied for one position, you commingled the applicants?
This was done by the prerogative of the Commission when we deliberated and looked at the pool of applicants who applied, because unfortunately I don't have the number as we'll get it. Oh, they have it now. Okay, so 26 persons applied for Deputy Commissioner of Police. 3 applicants applied for Commissioner of Police only, and 20 applicants applied for both.
So this determination by the PSC to commingle the applicants was a unanimous decision of all 4 members of the Police Service Commission. Is that correct?
Yes, and it was not done without consultation of the recruitment firm, and that's why we hired a firm, because that's not our forte. So it was done in conjunction with discussions with them and looking at best practice. Because if we are going to spend the kind of money in terms of the socioeconomic hard times, if we are going to spend this kind of money, it means that we have a responsibility to be accountable for this selection process. And so we thought it best then to go this route.
So you are saying, just for clarity, it was a joint decision between the firm KPMG and a unanimous decision with all 4 members of the Police Service Commission to commingle the applicants for Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police, to throw up a Commissioner of Police.
Yes, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with the word commingle, but yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Could I just take that issue one step further for absolute clarification, at least on my part? You have indicated, I think, the acting DPA, that 20 persons would have applied for both positions. So 20 persons, by definition, had an interest in both. And you are saying that outside of, if you quickly remove 20 from 50, you have 30 or thereabout. You are saying that the opportunity was given for all other persons, although they may not have applied for both, to be considered for Commissioner of Police or Deputy Commissioner of Police. Apart from the 20 who clearly were interested in both, the Commission, by this action, gave the opportunity to the others to be considered as well?
Yes, and one of the mechanisms we used was that when the Commission, could you hold for 1 second? Okay, sorry about that. When the Commission held its interview, because we held the final interview, we asked the question to every candidate. You have applied for the position of so-and-so. If the Commission considers you for another position, what is your opinion? That was asked of everybody. And the people who applied for both, we asked that same question and asked them to now clarify which position they are really interested in. Okay, there's an error. It's for Commissioner of Police. In terms of the tallying, there was an error, so it's 4 for Commissioner of Police, 26 for DCP, and 20 applied for both.
Thank you very much, Madam. The point I'm really driving at, to have the clarity, is that the applicants all for these 2 positions had an opportunity to be considered for either one, although they themselves initially may not have applied for both.
That is correct.
Yes, Member Oliveri.
If I may ask, just to further clarify the point. So if candidates applied for the position of Commissioner of Police only, did you also make that offer to them that they may be, if they do not, that they may be considered for the Deputy Commissioner? Did you, and at what stage would you have asked that? Would the candidates have been made aware that they were being considered for both positions? So I'm not looking at the ones who applied for Deputy that were considered for Commissioner, but the ones who applied for Commissioner, if they were asked if they would also may perhaps be interested in the Deputy position as well.
As I said earlier, the question was asked when the Commission held its interview, which was the last stage. So when the Commission held its interview, each applicant, whether they applied for Commissioner of Police or they applied for Deputy Commissioner of Police, I asked the question, you have applied for Commissioner of Police, the position of Commissioner of Police. If the Commission considers you for another position, what is your opinion?
Dr. Gomes, I understand what you are saying, but if you look at the process, the contract or the mandate given to the firm, in this case KPMG, can you tell this committee whether that mandate specifically stated that KPMG should look at one process for deputy, one process for commissioner, or one process for both? What was the mandate to KPMG, which under the order speaks about the firm, the commission shall contract a firm to conduct the recruitment process and afterwards do the assessment? When does the mandate of the firm allow for the firm to conduct a separate recruitment and selection for commissioner, a separate one for deputy, or does it allow for the firm to merge both?
As I said earlier, at every stage of this exercise, the firm consulted with the Commission. We had to sign off on every aspect. And so the firm came up in looking at the legal notices and in looking at all the various documents that they were provided with. The firm came up with a set of questions that were asked to everybody, the same set of questions.
Pardon, that's not what I'm asking, with all due respect. What I am asking, does the mandate given to the firm, either contractually or otherwise, stipulate that the firm conduct a separate process to recruit a commissioner of police, a separate process to recruit a deputy commissioner of police, or does the mandate allow for the firm to merge both?
Let me this matter for your ease and reference. And then I'll give way after Mr. Dayal Singh to Madam Oliveri and then to Mr. Ganga Singh. Now, in respect of the order made under Section 123, subsection 2 of the Constitution, which is legal notice number 218 of 2015, at paragraph 3, and this is largely for the benefit of those who are watching and listening because you are very intimately familiar with this. I quote, and this is to clarify Mr. Dayal Singh's line of question. The selection process for the appointment to the offices of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police shall be conducted in the following manner, colon. A, the Commission shall contract an appropriate local firm, hereinafter referred to as the firm, to conduct a recruitment process, including inviting applications for the positions, semicolon. B, and this is the The firm shall ensure that the candidates are subjected to the best practice security vetting and recent professional vetting. And C, and this is the crux of Mr. Dayal Singh's question, the notice continues. The firm shall submit to the Commission, 1, the results of its assessment process as mandated and contracted by the Commission. 2, a report on its assessment of the entire assessment process. And 3, in respect of the candidates referred to in subparagraph 1 above, the following documents: application of the candidate, biography or resume of the candidate, assessor's scores, assessor's feedback, medical examination report, security and professional vetting report. And D, the Commission shall then take into account all information on candidates and thereafter establish an order of merit list. Mr. Dayal Singh is asking you, the writing here tells us both offices, commissioner and deputy, and it outlines one process for both. He wants to know, in practical terms, whether the firm conducted one assessment process or whether it did something separate for commissioner and separate for deputy commissioner and reported to you in terms. That's what he wants to know. Am I correct, Mr. Dayal Singh? Yeah. Could you answer that succinctly, please?
No, the firm did not conduct one for Deputy Commissioner of Police and one for Commissioner of Police.
This gets interesting. You are saying the firm did not conduct a separate for commissioner and a separate for deputy commissioner? Am I clear on that? It conducted just one for both?
Maybe I am not understanding what you're saying, and I don't see the confusion. Yes, it's one assessment center.
No.
Center.
Process.
Sorry. He can say it for himself, but just for clarification so we can move on. He wants to know whether the firm assessed persons for the office of deputy commissioner separately and reported to you in terms, and whether the firm assessed people for the office of commissioner of police separately and reported to you in terms, and where persons fell in both categories, did they report to you in terms? That's all he's asking from a practical standpoint before I go on to Madam Oliveri. 1 second, please, Mr. Singh, please.
No, it was the same process conducted for all.
Mr. Singh, allow Madam Oliveri to intervene, and then we come to Mr. Singh. Please.
Thank you very much. I mean, I have to go back again to where the distinction was made, where you are asking persons if they are interested in both position or just the one in which they applied for. Now, you indicated that that would have been done when the PSC did the second interview. That's when the question would have asked. But correct me if I'm wrong, but the PSC second interview, was that on all 50 candidates or just on the 12 candidates that you all were carrying forward?
The PSC did not conduct 50 interviews. It was on the last 12 candidates.
So then it was only the last 12 candidates who were given that opportunity to be assessed for both positions?
Yes.
So, Chair, I think that it is necessary for the Commission to give us the stages in the recruitment and selection process, because we seem to be moving in a direction in which there's no sequence. But before I do so, I think it is necessary for the viewing public to understand what the Commission requested the firm to do. And in the request for proposals at page 4, it says, and I will read at paragraph 10, the introduction. The firm will be required to have a good knowledge of the process to select a commissioner of police and deputy commissioners of police in Trinidad and Tobago, and must also be intricately familiar with the legal challenges that may arise in the selection process, and execute the services in such a manner that should any challenge arise, it can be properly defended in our judicial system. The firm so contracted shall be required to undertake activities in accordance with provision section 3B to D, the Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police Selection Process Order 2015, legal notice number 218 of 2015, as amended by High Court judgment and so on, and any other legislative requirements. As such, the firm is required to carry out its own research to ascertain all legal requirements for the selection of a Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police. So that therefore, in the, Mr. Chairman, in the request for proposal, at that stage, there was no distinction in the process. That therefore, what you have, to use the word I think Mr. Member D.L. Singh used, there was a commingling at the request for proposal. So that is part of the agenda of the firm when they bid for the necessary documentation. But coming back to my original point, that was just for clarification, Mr. Chairman. I think that, Chairman, through you, Chair, that they should give us the whole process. Having recruited this firm, how did you go about having recruited the firm, how did you go about recruiting and selecting a Commissioner of Police and a Deputy Commissioner of Police? Because you have outlined it well in your letter to the President, but I don't think the public is aware of that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ganga Singh. So you're asking for the process from after we recruited the firm, or contracted the firm.
Chairman? Yeah. Mr. Chairman, through you to the Commission. Yes.
Do you have an answer for what Mr. Singh? You want to respond to what Mr. Singh said? Before I give it to Mr. Mitchell?
Okay. It's just that as I am the former chair, I don't have any documents. So I have to recall everything, and I'm looking from what she has, right? So maybe we could go ahead with that question, and then I could...
All right. Assume, before I give way to Mr. Mitchell, we must reasonably assume, this committee, that you are familiar with all of these matters, intimately familiar.
Yes.
And we have the DPA here sitting next to you with her support staff at the back, so that we don't reasonably expect you to have trouble providing us with information to these questions, because you're familiar, you lived it, and as well, she is here to support you with these documents, most of which we had requested in advance, so we have that. So yeah, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted the opportunity to piggyback on the previous question posed by Member Singh. I think the whole thing turns on, and I'm referring to the legal notice 218 of 215, section 3A, the words a recruitment process. It appears from that the Police Service Commission would have contracted a firm to conduct a recruitment process. It doesn't specify what the recruitment process is, and we accept that a recruitment process may vary from firm to firm, organization to organization, or according to the job one wants to recruit someone for. But there appears to be a gap, because in your terms of reference attached to your RFP, it appears as though the firm was contracted to design the entire recruitment process and the Police Service Commission to accept the design of the recruitment process. I'll go further to say that from the legal notices, it appears as though the firm was responsible for the entire recruitment process up until the submission of certain names to the Police Service Commission. In the documents submitted, and I refer to the KPMG proposal, it appears as though they have outlined very broadly the stages of the recruitment and selection process. The gap I think that we're missing, I would expect that the firm would have identified a scope of works, a standard operating procedure, a flow chart describing how they intended to go about the recruitment process. Can that be provided to this committee, whether it is available? Because I'm listening to some of your previous answers, and it seems as though it was a rolling development of a process by the firm. Because you said you consulted with the firm at every stage, etc. But I would expect that at the very beginning, the firm would have identified standard operating procedures and a flow chart identifying every stage of the recruitment process for your acceptance. So if that is not available now, if you can't describe it now, can that be made available? Because that is the gap that I see missing.
Okay, that can be made available because when they submitted their proposal, they outlined exactly how they conceived the project to be done. And so when we met with them at the various stages, this is before we actually started, from the kickoff time, we consulted with them with things where we needed clarification, etc. So that is available, Mr. Mitchell, in terms of the flow chart, all right? To answer the other question, can I go ahead? All right. In terms of the stages of the recruitment and selection process, we agreed with the firm in terms of the time frames. There was an implementation schedule and time frames for the application forms to come in, the advertisement before the applications, the advertisements. We reviewed all of those things. The time frame for that was 4 weeks, where the advertisement of positions locally, regionally, and internationally were done. Applications forms were made available online. And then the complete application form and resume were submitted by the particular closing date. The second stage was the screening, and that was, the time frame was 3 weeks. Application forms, resumes were reviewed for eligibility based on legislative requirements and suitability based on approved competency model. So that there was a competency model that they had submitted with the RFP, with their proposal. And we, as a commission, went through that for clarity and adding in our own pieces into that. Should I continue?
Yes, please, please.
Okay. So this was not done at the procurement level, because that's Ms. Mirage. This was some of the deliverables. So In terms of the screening, after the application forms and resumes were reviewed for eligibility and ineligibility, the Commission then selected a short list of candidates to undergo the assessment for the 2 positions. All applicants were notified of the status of the application at that point. Okay? Next was the assessment center. The time frame here was 4 weeks. This first short list of candidates were invited to attend the assessment center, which was in Port of Spain. Candidates underwent a comprehensive assessment. They did their own psychometric testing, then there were interviews, case studies, and role play. Based on the results of that assessment process, the Police Service Commission then selected the best fit candidates for further scrutiny and professional vetting. So we go now to security and professional vetting. Time frame, 3 weeks. Best fit candidates were contacted to provide additional information and authorization to undergo further checks. Candidates underwent comprehensive checks, financial, security, reference, background, and medical examinations.
As here in particular is this. Members of the public who the Parliament represent raised issues when it became public that some persons were invited by the Commission to change lanes from lane 1 to lane 2 and from lane 2 to lane 1, if I may use a metaphor. That created some consternation on the part of the public, and all things public affect politicians, representatives. The question, therefore, is, the question to really be answered here is, were 2 separate assessment processes conducted? Now, if you look at, as Mr. Ganga Singh directed us, at the terms of reference which you designed for the firm KPMG, which was hired by you to conduct that aspect of the process. If you look at item 3, and I'm speaking slowly so you can have it before you. Under the rubric scope of services, you will see, and Mr. Mitchell called it scope of works, you will see it says the specific tasks which the firm will be required to perform are as follows. 1, establish guidelines in writing for the various steps to execute the scope of services. And very importantly, at 2, develop a job competency model. My question for you is, we were talking about 2 different jobs, weren't we? Correct. Mm-hmm. Am I correct?
Yes.
And therefore, a job competency model will necessarily mean 1 for commissioner and 1 for deputy commissioner. Will you agree with that? Since it's 2 different jobs, and we accepted earlier that they are 2 different jobs. One 15 years, one 10 years, apart from other things.
And that is the major difference. And the Deputy Commissioner of Police can be acting as commissioner anytime. Yes, and that's how we came up with that one job competency.
That was not my question. My question was, do you accept, Madam Gomes, that when we talk the language of job competency model, we of necessity are talking about 1 for the post of commissioner and 1 for the post of deputy commissioner? That's the question.
Chair, that is what I was asking initially.
Yes, it is one job competency model.
Huh?
It is one job competency model that we had.
For both posts?
Yes.
Right. So you used one job competency model for both positions?
Yes.
All right, good. Now that we have an answer to that, let us continue. When you look at Roman 4 of the terms of reference, which you have before you, you will see it says design, assessment, design, and the specific task included that the firm design an assessment. At A it says design assessment center exercises, procedures, and scoring protocols for the offices of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police. The word "and" there tells me there are two separate issues. Will you accept that?
Accept that "and" means two different things.
Great. So we know now that you use one job competency model for both posts, and here they were required to design assessment centers, procedures, and protocols separately, since you agreed with me, for commissioner and deputy. Right. Now that we have that behind us, I'm asking you now, did they design separate assessment for both offices, or did they do the same procedure for both? Because we now agreed that they were required to do for separate offices. I'm asking in practical and real terms, did they or did they not?
It was the same assessment center.
And finally, for me, before I give way to Dr. Munilal, you said, Madam Gomes, that the commission was involved with the firm all the way through the process. Did you say that?
Yes, I did.
From a very practical standpoint, I would like to know, because you did as well say you signed off at all stages, and I understand what that meant. I wanted to know, were members of the commission or your support in the DPA, were you actually seated with and was part of the elements of the assessment as conducted by KPMG? I mean, in the room, following through, listening to the responses, grading. That's the question I'm asking. Were members, elements of the commission involved in that, or was that exclusive to KPMG, who then passed it on to you?
Thank you very much. As I indicated earlier, the members of the commission were involved in every aspect of the assessment center. The first interview, the Commodore was representing the commission.
All right, that's fine. So members of the commission were involved, actually involved with the firm as this process was being undertaken.
Yes.
And assisting in the grading and scoring and what have you.
Yes.
Great, Dr. Munilal.
Thank you. Absolute clarification. And I want to say it in a layman way, because I think we could all understand what I mean. Is it that the firm that you worked with closely at all material times, is it that the firm in their setup and in their framework used one particular set of testing, of exercises, of interaction and so on for all applicants, be that applicants of Deputy Commissioner of Police or Commissioner of Police? And therefore, because I could also see the benefit of doing that, because it may well be that that is the best way to get people at the very top and second and third and fourth Because in a layman way, I want to put it this way. If you are interviewing for a vice chairman of a committee or a vice president or a vice something or a deputy something, the person in any event holds on, sometimes for a substantive period, for the main office holder. So that it may well be that the committee, the firm, used one particular testing where the qualification difference was only, to what you have said earlier, a question of a length of years of experience. So I'm asking that because we are now saying that there were now two sets of separate assessment and exercise and interventions and so on, what would have been the thinking of the firm that all persons, so that, for example, if I applied to be a deputy commissioner of police, for my own reason, I have my reason why I am not interested in being commissioner of police, I am put through the same process as someone who applies for a commissioner of police. And at the end of the day, depending on my score, you then invite me to consider any other office. Is this what took place? Because I think members are sensing, and members of the national community have raised this issue of persons who may have applied for one job being considered for a second job and vice versa. While you told us earlier, it's 20 persons expressed an interest in either or. But you said earlier that all persons, and I mean all the 12, not the 50, as the case may be, the 12 were given an opportunity to consider any one of the positions. Because I can see where, in a practical sense, you know, what separates a chairman from a vice chairman? Essentially, a captain from the vice captain, apart from the length of service. You may want the same competency. So I wanted you to reflect on that.
May I ask the Commodore to answer this question?
Sure.
And others?
Okay.
Any member of your team is free to intervene on your...
Much of what you said is the thinking. It was only at the very last interview that the commission conducted that we asked the candidates the question about considering the alternative appointment. Prior to that, all the interviews were done. It was the same questions asked to everyone, and they were scored. I mean, I was part of the very first interview, and we were all aware that people applied for COP, the COP, and so the markings were done accordingly.
Beginning to get deeply troubled because best practice in HR will tell you you cannot have one competency model for a commissioner and a deputy commissioner, especially when you read the job summaries. They are different. So that to me points to a basic flaw. Question, did you have any legal advice that says you could have one competency model for two separate positions, one the substantive position as commissioner, and which, if you read the job summary, the incumbent in this office plans, organizes, directs, and controls all strategic activities in the police service, whereas for the deputy commissioner, the incumbent in this office assists the commissioner in chart and direction. They are two completely different positions.
What is your response to that? Troubling that you took the approach that you told us you took. What is your reaction to that?
My reaction is just as I said before. They're not completely different because somebody has to act at certain points in time for the commissioner.
Okay, no, that's fine. No,
okay, all right.
View is not important.
Okay,
we got the answer.
And as well, in terms of best practices and HR practice,
right.
We've done the research in terms of there is no public sector policy that prohibits.
All right.
Okay. Therefore, I have a follow-up, if I may. Let's just take a different tack for now. It's in the public domain that the votes went either 3-1 or 2-2, could you tell us what was the actual vote on the appointment of a commissioner of police? Is it one newspaper says the commission came down 3-1 on one particular person? There was a casting vote. Could you tell us what actually in terms of numbers of votes?
With all respect, Mr. Dialsing, you shouldn't be listening to the newspaper or just relying on the newspaper. I sent a document that you all have that says it was 3-1.
Great.
Now let me the matter that Mr. Dialsing had raised prior to that.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I've been very quiet, but maybe that there's need for further elucidation in regards to the question raised by Honourable Member Dialsing.
Which is what I was coming to, but please.
I'm sorry, I anticipated you.
No, you anticipated me, but please, let us hear your submission.
Because the thing is, there were different issues for consideration. The first issue, as relates to the question of a 2-2 vote, related to the question as to whether a candidate ought to be the subject of further investigation. That was a 2-2 vote. 2 for, 2 against. And that's where the issue
Excuse me, Mr. George. I think this should be in camera.
No, let us, just hold on, everyone, please, please, please. Let me say this. Let me just say this. Firstly, when someone has the floor, the person has it. I understand all of our concerns and enthusiasm and so on. That's one. But I want to urge us all in this troubled land to be very sensitive to the matters we had opened here with and your letter to us. If it is, because this is a forum of truth. Can't be anything else. This is a select committee of the House, so it is a forum of truth. And every one of us in this room are permitted to make our submissions. So let us hear Mr. George. If you have a view about what he is saying, you can communicate it to him in any other way you see fit, but we are hearing Mr. George. Please. We have reminded ourselves that we will call no names and we'll identify applicants if we had to by letters, which you have a code in front of you, for the reasons that you stated in your letter to us, which we accepted. That apart, everyone is free to express themselves in this forum of truth. And everything we say will be taken down in writing. It is being recorded. So let us have our say. Mr. George.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman and members, honorable members, and the media also. What thereafter transpired after the 2-2 deadlock was the exercise of a casting vote. Two members raised queries as to the appropriateness of the use of the casting vote. Legal counsel, internal legal counsel, indicated that the legislation does allow for the use of a casting vote, and the casting vote prevailed. Thereafter, the question arose as to the order of merit list and the approval, which then would have hinged on the previous issue of whether there ought to be an investigation in relation to a certain candidate. At that point, that vote went 3-1, with one member still insisting that since this is something that ought to be investigated, that member could not approve the order of merit list.
And Chairman, that feeds.
So that is how the 3-1 thereafter arose. But the fundamental issue, which is at the heart of the analysis, was the question of whether there ought to have been that investigation, and that was deadlocked 2-2 among the 4 commissioners.
Clarification, Mr. George. Just for that purpose alone, the votes on which you just spoke had to do with
whether there ought to have been an investigation based on certain information that had been brought before the commission. Yes, and that was in relation to a candidate.
Right. And the other vote that was 3-1 had to do with?
Well, after that vote was then decided by the cast and vote.
Yes.
Then the cast and vote was that there shall be no investigation. So therefore, that candidate's name remained. So therefore, it would now be to finalize what would have then been the order of merit list.
Thank you very kindly.
And that's where the 3-1.
Okay. And then Dr. Munila.
Thank you. So that actually...
Yes, and so, gentlemen, wait, just hold on. Let me just...
Let me finish my point.
1 second. Just 1 second, please. Come in.
Sure.
Right. Thank you, Chair. To Dr. Gomes, on the issue of due diligence and the professional and security checks, did the Commission write the Police Complaints Authority for background checks on any candidate or all candidates?
Yes.
Thank you. Were these reports that came back from the Police Complaints Authority shared with each member of the Commission? And I will ask first Commodore Franklin if they were shared with you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Ramkisoon?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
So every single report that came back from the Police Complaints Authority was shared candidly with all members of the Police Service Commission?
Well,
yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Let's go back to the area raised by Mr. George. Mr. George,
I didn't raise an issue. I was answering
but a piece of information came out from what you were saying that came as a different station to what we were discussing before, because you in clarifying, you brought a piece of information, and that piece of information had to do with a 2-2 vote and a casting vote. And you said that the legal advice was that the casting vote was proper, but it concerned an investigation into a candidate. I just wanted to clarify, investigation by who? Not the candidate. I'm not concerned about who the candidate is. An investigation by who or by what agency?
By the PSC. In other words, whether we ought to inquire further into the information we had received.
So the issue really was to ask for an investigation by the Police Complaints Authority.
No, sorry. By the PSC, first to inquire
What do you mean by PSC? So you wanted a further, or you wanted an investigation by...
You just said PCA. We are not PCA.
Yeah, I know.
PSC.
Oh, just to clarify, because I was just looking at a piece of paper as well. So the 2-2 vote had to do with a request by members of the Police Service Commission for your commission to undertake an investigation into one candidate.
Well, it wasn't a request. It was to decide whether it ought properly to be further investigated by way of an inquiry.
An inquiry. I'm concerned by an inquiry by who? The Police Service Commission?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is because, as the law stands, it is for the Police Service Commission to conduct any disciplinary proceedings and to decide upon them in relation to the offices of Deputy Commissioner and Commissioner.
That's correct. The law does provide that.
Now let me recognize for question Mr. Ganga Singh and then Madam Oliveri. Yes, I cast my eyes on your side.
Thank you very much. I just want to, for purposes of my own thought process, how many members, all members, the 4 members of the commission and only members of the commission were present at the time that you had the split vote, or were there others present, other members of the public, the DPO, members of the firm?
There was the project manager was present, and to the best of my recollection, I think the legal advisor to the Police Service Commission, one of them was present.
You see, Mr. Chairman, throughout the process and when my review of the documentation, you had the requirement of the strictest confidentiality and secrecy in the process. And what we have, that is why I wanted to find who were present. Because you had a significant leak that you have in the newspapers. And I would read from the Newsday of February 1st, 2018. Media reports implied that the people involved in the selection process were the 4 commissioners and the contracted company. Initially, this appeared to be a confidential process. So where did the leaks come from? So immediately, in a sense, whereas we contracted the firm to secrecy and confidentiality, it appears that in the very commission itself, there was a lack of confidentiality.
Well, I don't think you can deduce that, because we've just heard. Deduce that because we've just heard that there were other persons in the room. Yep. So that's fine. But the question, Mr. Singh, what is it?
The question I have is that, well, that is my finding on the matter, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the lack of confidentiality in the bosom of the institution. In the requirements of the firm, one of the things they required was the details of security and professional vetting. They had to conduct that. They had to do reference checks, credit checks, financial checks, security checks, education verification, work performance verification, performance appraisal. And you provided, and it's provided to us, Mr. Chairman, as you are aware, there was a whole question of job performance and so on. I said, and whether they were existing or closed complaints. I see that the former chairman indicated that in her summary report to the president that additional security checks were conducted and senior counsel's advice was sought. Could the former chairman indicate to us what was the advice sought from senior counsel with respect to these security checks?
The nature of the advice sought was if it debarred candidates from the recruitment and selection process.
You mean crossing lines as I put it, or do you mean participating at all?
Participating.
At all. Mm-hmm. But by that time, you were dealing with 12 persons.
Yes.
Coming out of a start of about 54.
Uh-huh.
We started with 54. 4 were deemed to be ineligible.
Yes.
Because they did not meet the legal requirements on the face of it. So you then went down to 50. By the time you are seeking the advice of which you just spoke, you were dealing with a small group of 12, am I correct?
Yes.
Good. Mr. Singh, continue. Your mic.
The mic. Seek senior counsel advice with respect to a specific instance.
Yes.
And the nature of that advice said that the person A or B is not precluded from being considered.
Yes.
And that advice can be made available to members of this committee?
I suppose so.
Yes, indeed. You'll send it to us as promptly as you may. Now, before I give way to Madam Oliveri and then to Mr. Mitchell, let me on the question of the number 12 raise another matter with you. First of all, Madam DPA, my question to you is, in respect of the issue of crossing lines, and you know what I mean by that, crossing lines, one being amenable to winning the office of commissioner and or deputy, that's what I mean by crossing lanes. Was your advice sought on that matter?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Let me ask you another question. In respect of whether there should be one procedure when we had two job competency models working with for two separate offices, my question to you is, was your advice sought as to whether it should be one or whether it should have been separate?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Your advice was not sought. One further question before I give way to Madam Oliver. Madam Gomes?
Yes. Yes, sir.
If 50 people were assessed by the firm, and it is only 12 who were invited to cross lanes, do you now consider that that fact could have been prejudicial to those others?
No, I don't consider that.
You don't consider
No.
that? Okay, Madam Oliver. Oh, sorry, you just now?
After.
Madam Oliver. Then Mr. Mitchell, then Don.
Thank you very much. We're going back to the issue of there being one competency model against which all candidates were assessed. What's troubling me is that, from the assessment report, I see one table where 5 candidates were deemed suitable for COP. There's a table where 16 candidates were deemed suitable for deputy COP. However, the entire 5 that were deemed suitable for commissioner do not all appear on the suitability list for deputy commissioner. So that has me a little confused then, that some candidates would have been deemed eligible for the superior position, but not eligible for the inferior position.
I think you should use inferior and inferior position.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Well, given that you said that the deputy commissioner would have to act for the commissioner at times, then it stands to reason that someone deemed suitable for commissioner should by default also be suitable for deputy commissioner as well. So I'm confused that the entire list then of persons deemed suitable for commissioner were not also in deputy.
Your confusion will now be clarified.
Could you just
answer the question?
The page, please, that you're referring to?
Which page? It's the assessment, right up at the top. With the one with the scores.
The selection process assessment report, it's page 34. We're looking at tables 2 and 3.
The one with the scores, which is strictly confidential, so we must be careful in managing that.
So.
Use your codes if need be.
It's Appendix C. Given that you said that persons who are applying for deputy would have to act for commissioner, then I would, and if you are presenting two lists, then a list of merit for commissioner, a list of merit for deputy commissioner, then all the persons who are eligible to be commissioner ought then to be eligible for deputy commissioner. Because it seems you have commingled the process and you are looking for a person who can perform in the commissioner role. So then they should also be eligible for the deputy commissioner role on that basis.
One of the things that we looked at was role fit, all right? So that people then differentiated themselves in terms of the vision that they may have had and delivery in terms of the role play, etc. So you were looking at the role fit there. And for instance, there's, what's this name? Just want to refer to the candidates.
I don't think we need to go into the specific candidate, but now you are providing a distinction then between the two positions.
Yes.
So, but initially you were saying that you use one competency model. So how do we now have a difference in the assessments for the role fit? Earlier on, when if the firm did one set of assessments based on which you would have then selected persons to go forward. Sitting in the mind of the interviewer, now that decision to offer persons both positions was done at the final interview stage, in the 12th stage. Prior to that, persons would have been assessed on one competency model, but they would have been assessed either for deputy or for commissioner. So if you're sitting in the mind of the interviewer, when you're asking, if it's the same questions you're asking, you're going to mark those answers differently based on which position you are that the person is being assessed for. So when you go through that process, so a person comes for deputy, they ask the same question, but they would be graded on a particular mindset. They come for commissioner, same question, you're graded on a different mindset. But then later on, you decide to commingle that. So I'm saying there would be some disadvantage then in tabulating those scores to determine which persons you are then at a later stage now going to ask, would you be interested in both positions?
Could you just give me a minute? Let me consult here.
On. Could you repeat in a terse way what your question is before we get the answer?
Given that one competency model was used,
yes,
then it stands to reason that persons deemed suitable for the commissioner position
yes,
should then also be deemed suitable for the deputy commissioner position, yes, since the reverse has proven itself to be true.
Correct. Thank you. And the documents you sent us shows that there are persons who are deemed suitable for commissioner, but whose names do not appear among those suitable for deputy commissioner. An explanation is being sought.
Okay, so to clarify where you would have had a candidate not being on the list for COP and not being on the list for DCOP.
Since you use one process.
What I could say about that is that there was a candidate who was already as DCP, a substantive DCP, so he would not appear on the DCP list.
And the others?
And in terms of the other candidates, so you're talking about table on page 34. That's what you're saying, right?
Which page you're talking about? 34, 37.
Well, on the page 34, I'm seeing two candidates who I believe are in the substantive position of this.
Call by number then. Which table you're looking at? You're looking at table 4? Look at the top in the dark.
Page 34, table 3.
Right, page 34. Yes.
Table 3.
Yes, no, I think we're looking at the wrong document.
We look at Appendix C, the selection process assessment report, the confidential pile, which table 3 deemed suitable for DCOP.
Yes, listen, what we're trying to do is to be all on the same page, literally. We have two documents, one of which you were given this morning.
Yeah.
Is that the document you're talking
Correct.
about? Could you tell us which page? It's written at the bottom. Which page?
It's page 34, but it's the fourth leaf in the pile. It's the fourth leaf in the pile. Document title, Appendix C. The assessment center results.
Okay. All right.
No,
right, good. Go, proceed.
He's on a different document.
That's all right.
He got it.
We have
he got it.
No, you're on a different document. This is a different document.
I have it. Go ahead.
Actually, has it?
Yeah, I have it.
So it's a list of 16 names?
Yes.
Just to be clarified.
It says table 3.
So,
deemed suitable for DCP, right?
So you just said that there was one candidate whose name did not appear there because they're already in that substantive position, but I think I'm seeing two.
No, there's only one substantive holder at this point in time.
All right. She's saying that number 3 in table 2 is the one she's speaking about. You see any other in table 3?
That is a substantive.
Number 1 is not substantive. Okay.
No.
I stand corrected.
All right, good. Good.
So for that reason, what I was looking at were the ones deemed suitable for COP not appearing on table 3.
Yes,
so the persons in table 2 not appearing in table 3. That was my concern.
Right. So could you answer that? How do you explain, apart from the one we just clarified, how do you explain that there are names that appear as suitable in table 2, among the 5 names there, and those names do not appear in table 3, apart from that substantive number 3 on the top list, as being suitable? How do you explain that?
Well, one of the things that you all would not have are the scores. All right? Sorry? Okay. Well, that's what Ms. Maraj is now telling me. I thought that you didn't have it. I'm sorry. So 4 of the 20 candidates were deemed suitable for the position of Commissioner of Police only. 15 of them were deemed suitable for the role of Deputy Commissioner of Police only, and 1 candidate was deemed equally suitable for both positions. And that came about given all the first stage assessment center tests and the process.
Which you will all...
Yes, there was commission members attended.
Another question on this matter, since these documents, this page is in front of you. Explain at number 4 in table 2. Everybody's on the same page with me? So George, at number 4 in table 2, for example, at the top of the page, right? You see a certain weighted score. And then when you look in table 3 at number 5, just by way of example, you see a weighted score which is higher than the one at number 4 in table 2. Are you with me? Just provide me an explanation with that, for that, please. How could one with less marks be suitable for the higher office than someone who is only suitable for the lower office with higher marks than the person in group 1 using the same assessment?
Because the candidates in table 2, from number 2, 3, 4, and 5, they applied for the position of COP.
I have ingested it. Let me digest it now.
That's the first phase.
Now, you're not speaking only to me, unlearned as I might be, and easily confused. You are speaking to the country, important organization and institution as you are. So we need an explanation. Could you venture one again, just for my understanding? Because we thought we heard it earlier.
Perhaps I can assist.
Please.
In assessing the candidates, we found that they were, although someone had applied for Commissioner of Police, and we questioned and we assessed accordingly, and we marked accordingly. But when we assessed others who applied for the COP only, and or both, we found that in assessing them for the COP, their marks were suitable, and therefore, for the COP, and they were marked in that category. So they would end up with some of them higher, right? Now, you would observe that one particular candidate appears in both, and if you have the scores, you'll see how high the scores are.
Yes, I'm seeing.
And it's for that reason we considered there were people who applied for the COP who had the potential and so on, based on their answers and their the quality of the answers and the quality of the vision and so on, that, hey, they have the potential. But there was only one that stood out, and that's why his name appears on both. Right?
One second. All right, good. Well, then just now, Mr. Dancing, do you want to go in on this matter? Mr.
Yeah, Chair, if I may. You see, this goes back to my very first line of questioning. And I want to ask Ms. Mirage. Now, you are not, I'm just asking you in your capacity. You did not provide advice to the commission. I think you said you will not ask for advice. Good. With hindsight, is it proper HR practice to have one competency model for both Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police, in your opinion?
In my opinion, you can have one competency model, but in that model, there must be a factor separating both.
Was there a factor separating both in this particular singular competency model?
I cannot answer that.
Okay. That's it for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to the assessment center and the assessments conducted. Now, in your terms of reference, it is suggested that the firm conduct the assessments and the results of those assessments be passed on to the Police Service Commission. But from the information provided to us, it appears as though the Police Service Commission participated in the assessment, conducted panel interviews. 2 questions. Who decided on the participation of the Police Service Commission in the assessment process? And do you believe, in hindsight, that that was a correct decision given the specific competencies, the specialized role that the assessment function required, do you believe that you all were competent to conduct that part of the recruitment process? Because I'm looking at resumes and I'm not seeing any HR competencies. So do you believe that you all were competent to form part of the assessment process in conducting interviews at the assessment center?
Mr. Mitchell, to answer the first part of the question, who decided on the participation in the assessment center? In terms of the participation of the PSC? I know that I'm assuming that you're referring to legal notice 218 when you were talking earlier.
I'm sorry, I'm referring to information provided to us that the PSC conducted a panel interview at stage 2, comprising primarily members of the PSC in interviewing candidates.
Okay. So based on the judgment that came out after that legal notice, the Commission is of the view that we needed to actively participate in the process rather than the firm doing everything and just handing us, which apparently was how it was done in the previous time with the Justice Institute through Penn State, all right? So in terms of the participation of the PSC, we were confident that we should participate in it so that we could be here today to be able to even answer questions. Otherwise, it would maybe have to be the firm. So in terms of if we believe that it was appropriate for us in terms of our competencies, we come from different backgrounds. We were also, the firm, it wasn't just the commission there. The firm, there were members of the firm there, and the firm, in terms of the consultants with the firm, coached the commission members so that we could be adequately prepared to be on the panel. Okay?
One follow-up. I'm seeing that the firm, in your terms of reference, and in their proposal, they were supposed to have recruited assessors and trained assessors. Were you all trained by the firm to conduct the assessment or any assessment?
In terms of the stage 1 of the assessment center, yes, the members who participated in stage 1 were trained, and I could ask Mr. Ramkisoon, who is also a member of the commission, to clarify that, please.
Mr. Chairman, member, yes, we were trained. We were given some training by the firm's consultant.
Member Mitchell indicated, was this a decision, a unanimous decision? That I think what he's trying to get off the PSC to engage in this process.
Yes, it was.
On this matter of the role of the DPA, and maybe Ms. Maraj, you could assist us. What is the role of the DPA in this process? Because I'm hearing that you were not consulted. Is that a legal requirement to consult you? Are you required at all to be consulted?
Well, first of all, Chairman, through you, we have to go back, if I may, to the previous legal notice, prior to legal notice 218, where it specifically says the DPA shall contract with the firm. Subsequent to that, when the legal notice changed, it said the commission. And the Commission shall contract. So it threw a different light on the entire matter in terms of interpretation. So whereas you had before, the role of the DPA was specific, now the role the DPA was not or is not in that new legal notice. The Commission and the Office of the DPA, we also had to go to various sources to get some interpretation of that. What is the role of the DPA in this current process? And subsequent to the judgment, which you all have a copy of, it specifically said, and even legal counsel, senior counsel, that it is the Commission. The DPA is only there to sign the contract because as the accounting officer and through procurement, the Commission cannot sign. It's a collective body under law. Right, so for the DPA, that was the end of the role of the DPA at that particular point in time.
This question is directed to Mr. George, a very distinguished attorney at law, and I ask specifically, could you direct us to what in the judgment, we have copies with us, specifically was used by the Commission to engage in the process more intimately as described by Mr. Mitchell? What in particular in the judgment would you direct us, this committee, to the part, because the law as we understand it now consists of legal notice number 218 as amended, and the amendment came out of the decision of Mr. Rajkumar. Am I correct, Mr. George?
That's correct.
Could you direct this committee for our help as a member of the then Commission to what in particular in the judgment led the Commission to forming the view that it should be sufficiently intimately involved in the assessment and scoring as Madam Gomes has just told us?
Well, being a responsible commission, we did not at all seek to guide or direct ourselves on a legal matter such as that. So what we did subsequent to the delivery of the judgment, we engaged the services of senior counsel. We met with him at his office. We had about 3 or 4 different meetings going through the ramifications of the judgment, and based upon what he distilled. So it was really his advice and guidance out of the judgment. Based on what he distilled out of it, he suggested that we must be clear at all times that the Commission, it must always be the final decisions of the Commission and not just the firm. And in that regard, he made it clear that the firm was there to assist us, not to lead us.
Okay. And insofar as best practice and technical competence to lead the firm, we heard a submission from Mr. Ramki soon that you enjoyed training by the very firm, their consultant.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the extent of that training. This is important to us.
Well, Mr. Ramki soon will have to tell you.
Mr. Ramki soon. What, you, Mr. George, were not the benefit of such? No, just now. My question. You were not the beneficiary of that training?
That part, because that referred to the first stage. Mr. Ramki was the one who did that, yes.
Right, so let me ask. Was every member of the Commission, for you, the beneficiary of the training of which Mr. Ramki soon spoke a moment ago?
No, there were two of us, both myself and Mr. Ramki soon, who were involved in that first stage.
Next question. So only Mr. Ramki soon and your good self, Mr. Franklin, Commodore Franklin, were involved in that stage of the assessment?
We were involved in the training. We were trained for that first stage.
And only you both participated in it?
I participated in every day.
You participated in all stages?
Every day of that first stage.
Every day, I'm sorry. Good. Mr. Ramki-Soon, could you tell this committee what was the extent and the need, well, not need really, the extent of that training?
Well, the training comprised...
By KPMG's consultant, you said?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. The training comprised the method, the manner of which you would ask questions, some suggested questions, the process or the by which you would assess, and do, as far as I can remember, those are the training.
Before I give way to Mr. Dayal Singh, the opinion of which you spoke, Mr. George, from senior, we would like to have access to that at the earliest. Please, Mr. Dayal Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the issue of role clarity and HR expertise seems to be lacking in this. According to the order, the firm shall submit to the Commission the results of its assessment process as mandated and contracted by the Commission. Am I now to understand that the firm trained members of the Commission in assessment?
Participated in the particular stage of the assessment, yes.
So the firm's recommendation was a joint recommendation between the firm and members of the Commission. Because you see, when I read the order, I get the impression on the order that the firm has certain responsibilities from Section 3 right up to 3F, and then it hands over its work, and then the Commission takes into account all the information on the candidates and then establishes the order of merit list.
Yes, Mr. Hines has just asked me, Mr. Ganga Singh.
Let us go back to basic documentation. When you look at the contract document, it says at page 17 of the contract document, clause 20.4, it is understood and agreed that all decisions shall be the Commission's responsibility and made by the Commission. In the firm carrying out its work, the firm will maintain independence, in particular with regard to decision-making and objectivity. In this regard, A, the firm will not act in the capacity equivalent to a member of the Commission or an employee when providing the services. And the firm will not form part of the Commission's internal control structure, and so on. So what it is clear that the Commission took the responsibility based on senior counsel advice to participate in every stage of the screening process. They then, but that did not preclude or taint or contaminate in any way the objectivity and the independence of the firm.
Sure. So that Madam Chair, that we are making this distinction between the participation and the full participation of the Commission pursuant to both the judgment and legal advice and the independent work of the firm. I think that's a distinction that we made.
So the firm and the Commission worked hand in hand throughout the entire process. So there was cross-fertilization of ideas, input along the entire process. Is that correct?
Could you just ask Mr. Franklin to clarify?
Listen, not really. The firm conducted the early part of the assessment. They came back to us and said, these are the scores and so on. The Commission decided, right, we'll take people above a certain percentage and send that back to the firm. Sorry. You following?
Mr. Franklin, I think I just want to clarify what we're driving at. Again, in layman terms, did the members of the Commission participate with this firm and tell them what to do?
No, did not tell them what to do.
Or influence in any way what the outcome would have been?
In terms of the interview stage, the interview, submit my score.
But by admission, you said you were trained by the firm in assessment, and you sat down during the assessment phase?
Yeah, there were several other people.
But that assessment, was that the according to the order, I'm not talking about your terms of reference, according to the order, is that allowed? Maybe Mr. George can answer this. Is that allowed under the order?
Sorry, which assessment are we speaking of?
Sorry?
Which assessment are we speaking of?
Under the order, Section 3, the selection process, etc., the firm shall submit to the Commission the results of its assessment, meaning the firm's assessment process as mandated and contracted by the Commission. I am here and I'm being made to understand, being a lay person, that the firm would have conducted training with Mr. Ramkisoon, Commodore Franklin, in assessment. So my question is, was this assessment the sole prerogative of the firm, or was it a joint venture between the firm and the Commission, and is that consistent with the order?
That assessment is an assessment that the firm was contracted to carry out by the Commission, but we had a duty to ensure that the tail doesn't wag the dog. So in other words, although we've contracted you to do the job, we have to ensure some level of participation and oversight so that we make sure that we are consistent with our constitutional mandate.
There's a difference between participation and oversight. I could see oversight.
And we carried out both roles. So in other words, some members actually sat in and participated, and then when those results came back, all of us would sit and carry out the oversight function.
But therefore, that calls into the whole question of objectivity when you receive your package of documents from the firm. If you had sat in during the assessment phase, would you be totally objective now?
In what sense?
When you have to construct your order of merit list?
Well, I think those who sat in could answer that for themselves.
Because you were part of the assessment, an integral part, because you were trained and you sat in.
Yeah, but this is when we had 20 candidates. That's when I sat in.
But one of those candidates became...
No, at that time,
recommended.
Based on the results of the interviews, we boiled that down to 12. And then that went into another phase of the process.
So, Commodore Franklin, just to quickly piggyback, more than being a part of the panel interview, members of the Police Service Commission at the assessment stage was also involved in scoring the candidates.
Indeed, in that first phase, yes,
at the assessment,
I scored and submitted the score. Now, it joined the other representatives of the firm because there were about 5 others. Yeah.
But Ms. Maraj, is that good practice? I'm just asking your opinion.
Chairman, through you, Mr. Diyal Singh. First of all, as I mentioned before, you had 2 separate legal notices, and where it changed substantially, and then you had a legal judgment. And with the legal judgment, both the Commission and the Office of the DPA, you had to go unravel. What does this mean for implementation? And as I said before, the Commission went to Senior Counsel for advice, and based on Senior Counsel advice and the contents of the judgment, because as you go through the judgment, it points to the Commission. It points to the Commission. And the interpretation of that, because I think many meetings were held from the Office of the DPA, we also had to seek advice on even the procurement aspect. But from the Commission point of view, how far can we get involved in this? And the responsibility was left up to the Commission. So how do you interpret the judgment, and how do you implement what the judgment is saying, what you're going to do next? So the confusion was there. It is still not clear, and it is not going to be clear until something happens, but the Commission had to work with what they had, and what they had was not clear. I think they did the best they could, because on one hand, the Commission is responsible. The Commission has to ensure at each stage it is approved, they agree, So that is how it went. And I think the decision was theirs in terms of how far or how deeply involved they got.
All right. Now, just for some further clarity, could you explain for our benefit what was involved in stage 1 and stage 2? A thorough explanation as to what stage 1 of the assessment, what that was about, and then what was stage 2, so we can understand what they were and what the differences were, as we would expect there would be.
Reading from this before, so I'll just go through really quickly again from the top. Okay, so the stages of the recruitment and the selection process, the application, and that included the advertisement, the application form being online, and the completed application form and resume submitted by closing date. In terms of this is stage 1 here. The screening time frame for the next stage was 3 weeks, where the firm then gave us who was eligible and ineligible, and then the commission selected a short list to undergo the assessment. The assessment center time, the 4 weeks, where shortlisted candidates were invited to attend the assessment center. They did the psychometric testing, a first panel interview, case studies, which they had to write a case study as well, and role plays. And based on the results of this assessment process, the PSC then selected the best fit candidates for further security and professional vetting. The security and professional vetting, that took 3 weeks, and then from there were recommendations. After the candidates underwent comprehensive checks, financial security, and so, and then we went into phase 2, which was the panel from the Police Service Commission interview.
After both stages were completed, I'm asking.
The list of 12.
When was the list of 12 consummated, finalized?
The list of 12 came up when we then had to do the final interviews.
Good. In other words, after the stage 1 and stage 2, thereafter you had of the assessment, and thereafter you had your final interviews. And it is during that final interview that these 12 persons were given the opportunity to cross tracks, cross lanes, as I keep describing it.
It was, that's what I was going to say, sorry. It was at that stage when we did the interviews that I asked the question.
Good. So that stage 1 was done, stage 2 was done, and then you, the commission, had final interviews. And it is during those final interviews that the question was asked of all of the 12, whether you were interested in both offices effectively.
Yeah. Yes.
Good. The question I have for you then is finally this. Were there persons, so at the end of stage 2, you had only 12 people.
At the beginning of stage 2. Stage 2 is when we did our interview.
Go ahead.
Prior to that, following the initial screening process, there was a short list of 20 candidates selected.
Yes.
And these 20 candidates were selected by the commission.
Yes.
Would you have, so was there any differentiation then in these 20 candidates as to persons being looked at for commissioner and a separate list of persons being looked at for deputy commissioner, which was then further commingled at the final stage, or what did that 20 candidates comprise?
In terms of the 20 candidates, we had a cutoff of 60%, and that's how we got down to the 12.
So this would have been persons being assessed just according to the singular job competencies, but in conducting that first assessment, so this would have been, sorry, let me just get it clear. One set of questions would have been done at that stage, and based on just straight results, those who got over 60 were moved on to the second stage.
Yes, and there was a role fit. There was a category of 15%.
So the number 20 wasn't decided previously. 20 was just the number who matched the target that you set. So there wasn't a number that you were looking for of candidates to move forward to the second stage.
No.
But the scores, the question of role fit would have factored into the scores that would have added up to get that 60%. So for candidate A, was assessed using the single competency profile, but if candidate A had applied for deputy commissioner, they would have been scored on a deputy commissioner weighting on that singular competency profile.
Perhaps we need some clarity here in the question, because you started off from applications. Applications came in and the firm did a screening, right? Then they went through, there were certain marks applied, and we cut off below 60%.
But that screening would have been based on what they applied for?
Yes.
Or
yes.
So was there?
So there wasn't any question of as I say, crossing over at that time. All right. Then we went into the interview session with the 20 candidates.
So the 20 was selected strictly based on
percentage.
You applied for this position, and we score you against what is required for this position. And that's how you got, and if you scored over 60, you were eligible.
Yeah.
The 4 who were not eligible, they would not have gone through that process because they didn't meet the minimum requirements.
They didn't meet their minimum requirements.
If it is,
no,
sorry.
So there was a scoring system then, based on what the candidate.
That was one given by the firm. That was done by the firm.
Yeah, so
we just got the results.
So based on what the candidate submitted.
Yeah.
So was there a different scoring system for deputy as opposed to commissioner?
Yes, they gave us a list of who scored what, and we just draw the line.
No, in terms of the marking scheme then. So there were two marking schemes at the stage.
We weren't privy to that. The firm did that. We weren't privy to that.
Because what confusion that would bring in then is if you later commingle the persons at the end of that process, but at this stage when you chose your 20, they would have been marked against 2 different scoring grades. But then you later commingle it. So
when the 20 was chosen and we graded them, we were still looking at the 2 jobs, but we identified some people who had the potential to move to the other level. We did not ask them whether they were interested in that at that time. When we got down to 12.
No, you said to move to the other level.
To consider,
So I mean, I'm really wondering, the persons who applied for commissioner alone, I mean, did you consider them? They would not have been marked for a deputy commissioner on that rating?
Marked for commissioner alone.
Yes, but persons who applied for deputy commissioner were marked for commissioner. So I'm just looking at the one-sided advantage there and what would have resulted when the commingling was later done.
Could I just ask a question that leads from what the MP said, Ms. Oliveira? I could ask it in this way. I don't know if it's the exact question, but in that process that you described, could there have been a candidate who did so badly as commissioner of police but could have been considered for a deputy commissioner? And by that process, is that what you're trying? Yeah. Vice versa, we look at it before, because it was clear from all that we have been through this morning that someone could have been outstanding as an applicant for Deputy Commissioner of Police and get into the pool for Commissioner. Yeah. But could it have worked the other way, where someone may have been average, moderate, or not that good for Commissioner, but he or she could have fit in to be a Deputy Commissioner, and they were disadvantaged.
It could have, but it didn't happen.
By this process.
It could have, but it didn't happen.
Okay.
Commodore Franklin, I think we have established there was one job competency model. You just said, and correct me if I'm wrong, there were then 2 marking schemes.
Yeah, so
one job competency model, 2 marking schemes. When did it enter the contemplation of the commission when you came to stage 2 to pose the question whether persons who had applied for the post of deputy, if they wanted to apply for the post of commissioner? And why wasn't it done for the other 8 persons?
Just let me go back to something, but there's one competency model, and there were one set of questions, the same set of questions to everybody. Schemes. Right? We marked everybody as we saw them. Right? You applied for DCOP, we asked you, as DCOP, what would you do, etc., in this circumstance, and so on, and we marked you accordingly. At the end of which...
So there was one marking scheme, or 2
one marking scheme.
But that's not
what was... But in the contemplation of how we mark, we asked you the question, as you apply for DCOP, so on, so on, so what would you do if blah, 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 according to the questions we had. Yep? And we graded you. You don't understand?
With the greatest of respect, Commodore, I'm having trouble understanding where we are going with this.
So, as we keep our eyes on 12:15, when this session will come to an end, because we have another engagement at 1:30, I'll just give way to Mr. Ganga Singh before we take the adjournment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, having read a lot of the material, notwithstanding we got it late, Wednesday evening, I'm of the view that this has been a very robust process. The whole process, from what I see, the engagement of the firm, the procurement of the firm, the deliverables of the firm, a very robust process. It seems to me that you start with a list of 54 candidates, and then through a process of elimination by a marking system, that you went down to 20, and then subsequently to 12. And in that 12, then you had the PSC having its own interview panel with the firm doing the markings, the collation of the markings subsequently. That is my understanding.
No. The final 12, the PSC did the marking.
Did the marking alone. Right. But the collation was done.
But we had advice from the firm, and we had participation of one person in the firm.
Now,
two persons from the firm.
2 persons from the firm. Okay. So therefore, in the scenario, are you satisfied? Did you give approval for the work of the firm? Because under the contractual obligation, you had to give approval.
Give approval for the
So you were satisfied with the work of the firm, KPMG?
Very much so. They were very professional, very confidential, and very robust. So yes, we are satisfied with the work of the firm.
So you were satisfied with the rigor?
You see, you have to be, Mr. Singh, just how professional and confidential KPMG was. You had spoken about a leak.
No, the leak was in the PSC, not in KPMG.
But this is the point. And I then brought this thing, and I said, but other people in the room. Now you are taking a submission, and you must be careful that KPMG was utterly professional, which brings me back to the submission.
You distracted me a bit there, Mr. Chairman. Yes. I wanted to deal, so that therefore, throughout the whole process, the PSC as a commission was satisfied with the rigor and robustness of the work of the firm.
Yes, we will.
All right. to keep your promises. You had promised that you would submit 2 legal opinions. In the opinions of 2 senior counsel, one having to do with
if anybody could be debarred.
Yes,
right?
that was one, and then the other point
from Mr. George.
Raised by Mr. George, where we expect those opinions for our
Yes.
benefit. So we expect that when we meet again, which would be very soon, we should spend very little time. By then, we would have read these opinions, and we should be able to bring an end to our interface with you. Mr. George?
Just to clarify, the opinions that I spoke of was in discussion. As to whether it was reduced to writing, the chair would have to confirm if it is in writing, that one.
Well, she promised it,
meetings,
so one assumes that it was.
Right.
One assumes that it was. One is expecting that it was. Yes. And just before we close, I want you to apply your minds to something that is gaining the attention of this committee as to whether all the candidates were treated fairly, given some special attention and opportunity that was given to a group of 12, and at what stage. So when we resume, these are matters we'll be focusing on. We are unable now to tell you precisely when, based on your schedule and ours, but we will collaborate with you very promptly by tomorrow to see whether we can find a common thread in our schedules to permit us to interface for a very short and effective while on the other occasion. On that occasion, by Monday we'll touch base with you on that. On that occasion, I would like to invite the Secretariat to invite the firm, KPMG, who will also join us on that occasion. So we spend a little time with you, and then we'll go on to them, and then to some other critical people. So I would like, on behalf of the committee, to thank you all very much for your service, for your coming, and look forward to your presence on the next occasion when we should be able to bring an end to our interface with you. Unless if there's anything useful else to be said, we will now suspend this public hearing, and we thank you very much. Travel safely to your workplaces.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very kindly. Thank you.
Chairman and members.
Mr. Chairman.